Resume recording. Okay, so today we're going to focus on the big picture of marketing. So a lot of folks jump right in and are like, I want to know how to get really good at Facebook or really good at Instagram. But instead, we're going to do, those are the tools, right? We'll get to the tools tomorrow. By tomorrow, I mean next week. Tomorrow is a vacation day. Today is about the big picture, like why you're doing marketing, who you're wanting to reach, and then the toolbox will come out next week. So it might be a little different than y'all think. So the biggest thing about marketing is that it's not about selling, it's about building relationships. And this is true for all people, right? It's not just for like developing a collector who's going to buy your work, you know, over and over again. It's also about like building a network of folks that know you and know your work and will, you know, refer you word of mouth, like happens with teaching artists all the time. It's about developing relationships with people like me, because I get asked by folks all the time for recommendations about artists, right? And if I know your work and if I know you and I know you'll answer the email, I'm more likely to recommend you. So it's about all of these endless relationships, not just about the single transaction. You're not selling a car. And even when you're selling a car, I mean, I don't know, I've never been a car salesman, but I bought a car one time. I bought a brand new car, and by me I mean my dad and I. Generational wealth. What's up? Anyway, I still, you know, it's been 5 years. I still get emails and texts from that person that sold me the car trying to get me to trade it in and buy a new one, right? So even then, it's not about that one car. It's about the like longer term relationship, right? So think about marketing less transactional than folks will tell you to, or the world tells you to. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do with that in mind is
Hey Molly?
Yeah.
I can't see your screen.
You can't see my screen.
It says that I'm viewing it, but it's not on my screen. Is anybody else having that problem, or is it my computer that's like 12 years old?
You can see my screen? Not if you can see my screen.
No, it just says okay. It's my computer. I might log out and log back in.
Okay.
Let's see if that works. So
okay.
Let me try.
I can see it okay.
All right. Now the challenge is going to be whether or not the sound on this video will go. There we go. Okay. So this is Amanda Palmer. When I showed this to my students last year, none of them knew who Amanda Palmer was. None of them had heard of the Dresden Dolls. That was hilarious. That gave them a whole new homework assignment, but they were also all, you know, 20. So anyway, here we go. And then we'll talk about this a little bit, because as I said in the beginning, there are some things that I really love about this take on both marketing and fundraising, funding your work. There are things I really hate about it, but it's really, I think, thought-provoking and prompts you to think about these things in a different way. So here we go. And can you hear it? Okay.
So I didn't always make my living from music. For about the 5 years after graduating from an upstanding liberal arts university, this was my day job. I was a self-employed living statue called the 8-Foot Bride, and I love telling people I did this for a job because everybody always wants to know who are these freaks in real life. Hello. I painted myself white one day, stood on a box, put a hat or a can at my feet, and when someone came by and dropped in money, I handed them a flower and some intense eye contact. And if they didn't take the flower, I threw in a gesture of sadness and longing as they walked away. So I had the most profound encounters with people, especially lonely people who looked like they hadn't talked to anyone in weeks. And we would get this beautiful moment of prolonged eye contact being allowed in a city street, and we would sort of fall in love a little bit. And my eyes would say, "Thank you, I see you." And their eyes would say, "Nobody ever sees me. Thank you." And I would get harassed. Sometimes people would yell at me from their passing cars, "Get a job!" And I'd be like, "This is my job." But it hurt because it made me fear that I was somehow doing something unjob-like and unfair, shameful. I had no idea how perfect a real education I was getting for the music business on this box. And for the economists out there, you may be interested to know I actually made a pretty predictable income, which was shocking to me given I had no regular customers, but pretty much $60 on a Tuesday, $90 on a Friday. It was consistent. And meanwhile, I was touring locally and playing in nightclubs with my band, the Dresden Dolls. This was me on piano, a genius drummer. I wrote the songs. And eventually, we started making enough money that I could quit being a statue. And as we started touring, I really didn't want to lose this sense of direct connection with people because I loved it. So after all of our shows, we would sign autographs and hug fans and hang out and talk to people. And we made an art out of asking people to help us and join us. And I would track down local musicians and artists, and they would set up outside of our shows, and they would pass the hat, and then they would come in and join us on stage. So we had this rotating smorgasbord of weird, random circus guests. And then Twitter came along and made things even more magic because I could ask instantly for anything, anywhere. So I would need a piano to practice on, and an hour later, I would be at a fan's house. This is in London. People would bring home-cooked food to us all over the world backstage and feed us and eat with us. This is in Seattle. Fans who worked in museums and stores and any kind of public space would wave their hands if I would decide to do a last-minute spontaneous free gig. This is a library in Auckland. On Saturday, I tweeted for this crate and hat because I did not want to schlep them from the East Coast, and they showed up care of this dude, Chris from Newport Beach, who says hello. I once tweeted, "Where in Melbourne can I buy a neti pot?" And a nurse from a hospital drove one right at that moment to the cafe I was in, and I bought her a smoothie, and we sat there talking about nursing and death. And I love this kind of random closeness, which is lucky because I do a lot of couch surfing. In mansions where everyone on my crew gets their own room, but there's no wireless, and in punk squats, everyone on the floor in one room with no toilets, but with wireless, clearly making it the better option. My crew once pulled our van up to a really poor Miami neighborhood, and we found out that our couch surfing host for the night was an 18-year-old girl still living at home, and her family were all undocumented immigrants from Honduras. And that night, her whole family took the couches, and she slept together with her mom so that we could take their beds. And I lay there thinking, these people have so little. Is this fair? And in the morning, her mom taught us how to try to make tortillas and wanted to give me a Bible. And she took me aside and she said to me in her broken English, "Your music has helped my daughter so much. Thank you for staying here. We're all so grateful." And I thought, this is fair. This is this. A couple months later, I was in Manhattan, And I tweeted for a crash pad, and at midnight, I'm ringing a doorbell on the Lower East Side, and it occurs to me, I've never actually done this alone. I've always been with my band or my crew. Is this what stupid people do? Is this how stupid people die? And before I can change my mind, the door busts open. She's an artist. He's a financial blogger for Reuters. And they're pouring me a glass of red wine and offering me a bath, and I have had thousands of nights like that and like that. So I couch surf a lot. I also crowd surf a lot. I maintain couch surfing and crowd surfing are basically the same thing. You're falling into the audience, and you're trusting each other. I once asked an opening band of mine if they wanted to go out into the crowd and pass the hat to get themselves some extra money, something that I did a lot. And as usual, the band was psyched, but there was this one guy in the band who told me he just couldn't bring himself to go out there. It felt too much like begging to stand there with the hat. And I recognized his fear of, is this fair? And get a job. And meanwhile, my band is becoming bigger and bigger. We sign with a major label. And our music is a cross between punk and cabaret. It's not for everybody. But, well, maybe it's for you. We sign, and there's all this hype leading up to our next record. And it comes out, and it sells about 25,000 copies in the first few weeks. And the label considers this a failure. And I was like, 25,000, isn't that a lot? They were like, no, the sales are going down. It's a failure. And they walk off. Right at the same time, I'm signing and hugging after a gig, and a guy comes up to me and hands me a $10 bill. And he says, I'm sorry, I burned your CD from a friend. But I read your blog. I know you hate your label. I just want you to have this money. And this starts happening all the time. I become the hat after my own gigs, but I have to physically stand there and take the help from people. And unlike the guy in the opening band, I've actually had a lot of practice standing there. Thank you. And this is the moment I decide I'm just going to give away my music for free online whenever possible. So it's like Metallica over here, Napster, bad, Amanda Palmer over here. And I'm going to encourage torrenting, downloading, sharing, but I'm going to ask for help because I saw it work on the street. So I fought my way off my label, and for my next project with my new band, the Grand Theft Orchestra, I turned to crowdfunding. And I fell into those thousands of connections that I'd made, and I asked my crowd to catch me. And the goal was $100,000. My fans backed me at nearly 1.2 million, which was the biggest music crowdfunding project to date. And you can see how many people it is. It's about 25,000 people. And the media asked, Amanda, the music business is tanking, and you encourage piracy. How do you make all these people pay for music? And the real answer is, I didn't make them. I asked them. And through the very act of asking people, I'd connected with them. And when you connect with them, people want to help you. It's kind of counterintuitive for a lot of artists. They don't want to ask for things, but it's not easy. It's not easy to ask. And a lot of artists have a problem with this. Asking makes you vulnerable. And I got a lot of criticism online after my Kickstarter went big for continuing my crazy crowdsourcing practices, specifically for asking musicians who are fans if they wanted to join us on stage for a few songs in exchange for love and tickets and beer. And this was a doctored image that went up of me on a website. And this hurt in a really familiar way. And people saying, you're not allowed anymore to ask for that kind of help, really reminded me of the people in their cars yelling, get a job. Because they weren't with us on the sidewalk. And they couldn't see the exchange that was happening between me and my crowd, an exchange that was very fair to us, but alien to them. So this is slightly not safe for work. This is my Kickstarter backer party in Berlin. At the end of the night, I stripped and let everyone draw on me. Now, let me tell you, if you want to experience the visceral feeling of trusting strangers, I recommend this, especially if those strangers are drunk German people. This was a ninja master level fan connection, because what I was really saying here was, I trust you this much. Should I? Show me. For most of human history, musicians, artists, they've been part of the community. Connectors and openers, not untouchable stars. Celebrity is about a lot of people loving you from a distance. But the internet and the content that we're freely able to share on it are taking us back. It's about a few people loving you up close, and about those people being enough. So a lot of people are confused by the idea of no hard sticker price. They see it as an unpredictable risk. But the things I've done, the Kickstarter, the street, the doorbell, I don't see these things as risk. I see them as trust. Now, the online tools to make the exchange as easy and as instinctive as the street, they're getting there. But the perfect tools aren't going to help us if we can't face each other and give and receive fearlessly, but more important, to ask without shame. My music career has been spent trying to encounter people on the internet the way I could on the box. So blogging and tweeting, not just about my tour dates and my new video, but about our work and our art and our fears and our hangovers, our mistakes. And we see each other. And I think when we really see each other, we want to help each other. I think people have been obsessed with the wrong question, which is, how do we make people pay for music? What if we started asking, how do we let people pay for music? Thank you.
Okay. So there's a lot in there, both good and bad, that I think is really interesting, and I'd really like to hear from y'all about how it translates. I mean, this style of asking doesn't work for all personalities. It doesn't work for all arts media, but I think the idea of pushing back against the shame, pushing back against the idea of that what y'all do is not without value, is without, it has value, is really important. And I think the idea about building authentic relationships where you get what you need and folks get what they need, it's almost like the barter system. You're bartering with art. Sometimes the answer is money. Sometimes the answer could be other things, right? Depending on what you need, what they need. Anyway, what are y'all's thoughts? Let's talk about it.
That was really cool to watch. She had so many different points, and some of them did really resonate with me. Others didn't as much. I personally am not someone who likes to take risks and trust people on the level that Amanda Palmer is trusting them. But what she's saying about people are invested in you, and that's why they want to support you. That makes a lot of sense. I've realized that some amount of time ago, that people buy my artwork, but they aren't buying it only because they like it. They're buying it because they like it, but also they know I made it, and they've heard more about the process and the journey and the struggle of how I came to make it, and that makes them more invested in it. And so then they see more in the piece than just, oh, it's an image that I like.
Yeah, and I mean, there's like a lot of layers in there and things that I just like scream in me that are not okay. You know, that they don't pay their opening bands, that they expect their opening bands to pass a hat, like that sort of stuff. I always have an issue with, um, because but like the idea that what artists are doing has worth, and asking for the things you need, which is frequently money related, in exchange for the art is a good thing, but you have to build the relationships to ask. And a lot of that is trusting and knowing that it's a two-way street, but also knowing that your work is valuable and you are valuable. What did y'all hate about it? Have some feelings.
I don't think there was anything that I hated about it. I thought it was a really bohemian way of thinking about things, and exciting that it worked for her. Like a few of you probably felt the same way as I do. That seems like a very hard thing to do, maybe once in a while, but it just seemed in line with her personality, and that it was maybe not always comfortable for her, but more comfortable.
I would have liked to have heard more about the transition from doing the statue acting to sort of for survival money to it's easy to call on your fans if you have 25,000 fans, and it's easy. I feel like there's always it brings up a good point of like volume is never seen as enough in like our capitalist world, in terms of like you could always be better, you could always do more, you could always be better, like you could always have more audience. So I wouldn't have been able to tweet in Melbourne that I need a neti pot, like I think it's easy to count on lots of people when your art has already had an impact on them. But to get there, that's the part I think most of us are in. So I like the sentiment though, and I do feel like my work as an artist like thrives off of good connections and good relationships, and that like ideally it will keep rolling into a beautiful snowball that just like gets bigger and bigger. But I know that there's probably going to be ups and downs and relationships that come and go.
Yeah, Jim. Jim with a haircut.
First time in like 8 months. It was awesome. I think that there's a lot actually. I think one of the things that MJ pointed out was sort of that it's hard to have that trust and that faith if you don't have 25,000 fans willing to donate $1.2 million to you. But one of the groups that I've played with and have spent many a night in punk houses with no bathroom and free Wi-Fi is that I do think she has a point in that, you can ask and people will offer you places to stay and food and things like that, even at a much smaller level than, like what the Dresden Dolls have or had. But yeah, it is. And I've also been pleasantly surprised with like my personal music, like just putting it out there and being like, pay what you want. And I've had a few surprises in what people would just pay. Like, oh my God, I wouldn't pay that much for it. But I also didn't catch that part about them not paying opening bands, and that
You kind of have to know that.
That's kind of
it's
crappy.
very between the lines that
Yeah, I think that's really, yeah, not cool.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like for me, there, you know, the reason Amanda Palmer can get 25,000 people to donate over $1 million is that like that was after the Dresden Dolls had like a song that every person knew, you know. So and asking for money in that way and putting stuff out for free, you know, it's also different when you're a musician than when you have a physical piece of art, because like if you're giving folks, if you're what you're asking for essentially donations for, a pay what you can for a piece of music that is, you know, endlessly replicable, that's very different than a pay what you can for a not replicable piece of art, you know. So it also works in a digital place. But yeah, I think the fear of asking, I don't know, there's just some stuff in there that I really love and I find really fascinating. And also when, you know, there's a book called The Art of Asking too that she wrote, and like when it came out, it sort of, you know, a lot of performing artists were like, oh, this is a paradigm shift, everything is different now, we should all be doing things this way. And like, you know, I have some feelings about that. Like there's some things that I'm like, yes, absolutely. And there's some things that I'm like, this only works if you have Amanda Palmer's personality, you know? But I think that, yeah, Rachel.
I was gonna bring up exactly what you said, in that like I enjoyed watching that, I like hearing that, I've heard that, but it does not translate to a visual artist, particularly if your paintings or your prints or whatever it is, your sculptures, whatever you're making, is a sizable amount of money. Like you can't. So I'm old enough, or at least I've been doing this long enough to remember when I first started, people had the internet, but people didn't have websites. Facebook wasn't around, nothing was around. So really easy ways of marketing now or building a following, but also really easy ways to get lost, did not exist. So when you had a show before, when you had an exhibition, it was underground newspapers that you were sending press images to, and it was word of mouth. So some things were so much easier in that it was a smaller playing field, but some things were so much harder because you couldn't get outside of your little realm. And so now it's like swimming, it's like you kind of learned to swim in the neighborhood pond and then you got dropped into this huge sea. And as a visual artist, you know, I can give away prints now that I have those capabilities, but it's not like performing. Like I feel like the venues are very different, and what the ways in which you can, unless you have a huge hunk of money to invest on the front end, it's really hard to be that way. Does that make sense? So I find it harder to translate that same way of operating. I don't know what I'd Kickstarter unless I had an idea for an exhibition, or something in which I already had the venue, I already had, like you would have to have so much already in place in order to actually make it work. So yeah.
And Kickstarter and crowdfunding is also very different now than it was when she, like, that was sort of at the beginning of it. That was one of the first, you know, big music projects that was fully funded. I think that was, there had been a couple before, but, you know, like
now there's like Pantheon and stuff that are trying, I think, to make that way of finding income available to other artists, or to other levels of artists. Yeah.
Patreon.
Yeah, that's what I meant. But even looking, I mean, I don't know if you guys have looked into that. I've looked into that. That is still kind of daunting, and I don't know, it's just different.
And it's still focused on folks that can, you know, like I know a lot of writers and performers that have Patreon accounts, and it's that same idea, is that like you subscribe and then you get a poem every month, but like everybody gets the same poem. Not everybody can get the same piece of jewelry, you know? I mean, you can, but not in that same way, you know? Not everybody can get the same painting. maybe if you're making zines, right? That's, but yeah, I think the translation for me into arts marketing, and I think a lot of folks would say that's a fundraising video, you know, that's for development folks, but I think it's marketing. I think it's both, because it's really focusing on relationships as the basis of how you make a living in the arts. And I think that's very true. And also just capturing that, like, you know, person driving past them yelling, get a job, and saying, no, this is my job. This is a fair exchange. You giving me money for this is a fair exchange. We both get something here that is valuable. I think those two pieces are like the keys to this for me.
At the start, you have the balance of, you know, if you're working a regular job, you have that balance of how many hours can you work on your art, and where you, I don't know if you guys feel that, but there's always that element. Oh, did I spend too much time on this? Did I not spend enough time on that? Not guilt about creating, but just finding that right balance, I guess. But to speak to the idea of marketing today, I think there's also that element of reproduction, and understanding how many options are out there for creating a financial pathway. I'm just at the start of that, and I'm not sure, you know, how successful it would be in like monetizing the creations I make. And I imagine the you know, taking those originals and finding that market compared to a production type market is drastically different. I'm not quite sure what either one looks like in terms of relationships, you know?
Yeah, and you're a painter and muralist, correct?
My background is in teaching. I originally was in graphic arts, and then, so what I do now is abstract painting, and I am in the process of creating a piece in porcelain.
Oh, fun.
So I'm kind of here and there.
Mm-hmm. But visual art and teaching.
I don't teach anymore.
Okay.
But yes,
Okay.
The porcelain one is more like an installation type piece, something that would be in its finished form, mass produced. But currently, just, you know, it's a one-off. It's an original.
Great.
Yeah.
Final, like, big takeaways from Amanda Palmer, The Art of Asking. Yeah.
I think the hard part about asking, at least for me, kind of going off what others said about the 25,000 fans, is that it ends up being the same people. So I'll often be like, oh, I have to ask, you know, because I don't have a car and I make giant paintings. So it's like, okay, I have to ask my boyfriend to help me get these to a gallery. Or I have to ask one of my many floor mates, you know, who has a car to help me. But it's sort of limited the number of people, and the pandemic has limited it even more because some of the other folks who could help, you know, now they're being super isolated and super careful, so they can't anymore. So I find the problem is sort of the opposite, where I'm like, oh, I don't want to keep asking the same people all the time for help, you know?
I think Amanda Palmer would say, why are they, like, what's their motivation? What are they getting out of it? Is it like a fair transaction? and you know, sometimes what they're getting out of it, and like that makes it sound only transactional, right? Like it's just dollars, but it's not, particularly when you're talking about art and artists. Like it's about, you know, beyond that. So, you know, like I think also trusting that people will only say yes if they really want to say yes too. That's part of the trust, is the like asking for help and then saying, and then trusting the people around you to say yes only if they actually want to.
That's
Right?
a really great point, and it's often hard to like, it's because we're sort of raised with the get a job mindset. At least I certainly was, you know, growing up, people were like, but you're smart, why are you trying to be an artist? But you're good at math, like why are you what? And so it's hard to, you're always trying to throw that mindset away and be like, no, this is real, this is real.
Yeah. Yeah. What y'all do has value in the world. And like part of that is a mindset shift in like, it's valuable. How we denote value in the United States right now is mainly through dollars. So your art has value. That value is how we assign value to things is dollars, but also how we assign value to things emotionally is like, who are we willing to dog sit for? Who are we willing to like help them schlep their work to the gallery? Who are we willing to, you know, help move? And, you know, as we all age, we all get a little bit better at saying yes or no and being honest about that, I think. But that goes both ways in like trusting folks to say that when they say yes, they really mean it. And then when they say no, respecting the no, you know? Okay. Marketing. Any other final thoughts just about Amanda Palmer?
I just wanted to say I'm interested in, or something I think about a lot is sort of like I think she used the example of, oh, I stayed with a family that were immigrants and they didn't have much money, and I felt like, is this right? And I think that like, as someone who like has other choices or has like certain family financial access and privilege, that can be a challenging thing, because I feel like a lot of the arts scene, to be able to or like I've talked to other people in my same field as like children's books illustrators and author illustrators, and I've been like, hey, I'm really struggling to make ends meet. How are you guys doing this? Like, what are your financials exactly? And like, they all revealed that basically they have a partner who makes decent money. So I sometimes feel angry and guilty that like the field that I'm in is so financially inaccessible, and I want to, and I'm like always hustling various things. So I sort of am in this in-between spot where I feel guilt because I do have financial privilege of certain sorts, and then anger because I don't of other sorts, and I know many others are in an even worse off position than me. So it's just sort of like, those are some things swirling in my mind that I think do affect how I work as an artist, and how I can tend to undervalue my work because it is like undervalued in the larger sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, one thing I'm like a huge proponent of, and I will say this like from a position of privilege, but like I'm a huge proponent of bartering. But I also like was lucky enough to grow up with parents who were CPAs, and like my mom has like some really specific art collections because she had two artist clients. She had one jewelry maker and one painter client who had really complicated tax returns and couldn't pay to have their taxes done. And so like my mom just has a bunch of their work because that's how it worked. You know, she's in Southern Arizona, so she also had some like a bunch of rancher clients. And one year they had a really bad year and we got part of a cow. you know, and like, that's just, I love that, you know, and like my parents were financially stable enough that they could have 2 clients where they got, you know, a painting instead of money. The cow is like pretty clearly, you know, offsetting because it was, and it like, I will say it, she also liked that barter so much that he paid her in meat for the rest of their, and like now she's retired, he's not, so now she buys meat from him every year because it's like free range, organic, like it's a human she knows, open ranching on the Arizona Mexico border, and then like has a local butcher it. It's like all the small business stuff, and that you know, it's just way more tasty, but also supporting a small business. And my mom was into that, so like I grew up with that sort of atmosphere as like a person in a like very solidly like comfortable middle class, that like bartering was a good thing, and that you should figuring out how to support others in a way that works for both of you is good. It doesn't always have to be about actual dollars, right?
We've done that several times. We've bartered to get our wills and all that stuff in place with lawyers, CPAs, and then like work around the house. Like when it was a project that we couldn't do, you know, maybe not the whole bill, certainly not the supplies, but when it came to labor, if it was somebody who wanted to do that. And I've found that people are actually really excited usually if you kind of ask.
How does that conversation sound? Like, how do you introduce it without insulting someone?
Well, I don't know about you, but when people find out what I do, because I used to not tell anybody I was an artist because I didn't want all the questions. Because if you tell somebody you're like an accountant, you don't really get any questions. But if you say you're an artist, you start getting all these like, oh, that's nice. You know, did you actually go to school for that? Somebody asked me. And I just laughed at them. But now I own it, I think, a little bit more confidently, and I'm like, I'm an artist, so just be done with it. And usually from there, people then take an interest. And if I'm in a situation, so the like the lawyer work, the person that was a lawyer, it was a relational thing already. So there was already a relationship there and an interest in my work. And so I just said, hey, would you be willing? This would be great for us. And, you know, usually what I do with that is I will cut out the gallery commission. So they're getting more artwork for their buck, and then I'm getting what I need. And the same happened with the, like the person that was doing work at this was in Virginia, at the old house. So, I mean, it was just kind of natural. I mean, I was willing to ask, I will say that, point blank. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's 2 important things here about the bartering, which is one, being willing to like start that conversation that you know is going to end up with like a ton of questions saying, yes, I'm an artist. But also that leads to all of these relationship pieces that you have to be building to doing your marketing anyway. So I think like figuring out how to get comfortable talking about yourself as an artist and what kind of work you make and how to like get used to answering those questions is super valuable in all ways, right? Because you're always marketing, you know, you always have to be marketing yourself. And by marketing yourself, I mean building those relationships. And then like the worst thing that can happen if you ask is that folks say no, right? As long as you're asking respectfully and you're willing to take a no and move on, then that takes sort of the fear out of it, right? Because like the worst thing that can happen is that they say, no, we can't do this, but here's how much it costs. And then you move on from there. Like the no is not terrible. It's just a no. So I think those 2 pieces about bartering and like that leads to marketing more broadly and building these relationships more broadly is you know, in a ethical society where we respect each other, how do we all get what we need? And I think one of the things that you need to start with is knowing deep down in your soul that art is something we all need, right? It needs to exist in the world. It's important and it's valuable. So you're not, you're not taking advantage of someone. You're not offering them something lesser than. You have something that is vital to human existence. So you have to talk about it. Art is cooler than money. And more interesting and it and more valuable, it's like, yeah. Okay.
Moment of beauty sometimes.
So let's talk about marketing. All right. Oh, let me get the chat back up here. I hate how the little chat box always disappears when I share my screen, and now I can't find it at all. Here we go. Okay, so these are the two biggest questions that I always ask people when they start talking to me about tips on how to sell their art and get their art out there and make an income is, who is your art for? And who is going to buy it? The best answer, the best, most clear, most fascinating answer I ever got was from someone named Kai, whose work, when they're making their work, they have a very different person in mind than the person that's going to pay for it. That happens a lot, right? Like a lot of times you're making your work for somebody who doesn't have the money or access or something. There's some barrier to paying for it. And sometimes the people that are going to pay for it are not the end user, right? Are not the person that's going to experience it. It's the grant maker. It's the foundation. So these are two really different questions that I think you have to answer before you can do any marketing work, right? You need to know who you want to be reaching and why before you start using the tools. So in marketing, there's this wonderful thing called personas. And I have taken some worksheets from the National Arts Marketing Project's Marketing Handbook, which is pretty big and it's online, and I will put a link to it on the website. And it was edited by someone that I know and really like and respect, Ruby Lopez Harper, who's been to Rhode Island a couple of times and done some work with us around advocacy. She works at Americans for the Arts. But anyway, personas are really common in marketing, and it's really about thinking deeply about who you are targeting, like who this is. So I like to pivot, but the downside is that all of the like persona worksheets and that sort of stuff that's out there is all designed for not individual artists, right? So I pivot this and say, if you're looking, you should do 2 personas at least. One, the frequent attendee, which is who is it for? I pivot it to be who is it for? And then the second one is who's going to buy it, right? So, and these links are already up on the Business Basics website, so don't worry about getting them now. But thinking about the persona is you're making up a fictional person based on these core questions of who is it for, who is in your mind as you're making it. So for me, I'd look at this persona of who I'm making it for, and what I'm making are things like the Business Basics Bootcamp, right? So age is probably for me a pretty big range, but like most folks who come to my stuff, this kind of stuff, are like 27 to 40, I want to say. Gender is yes. Ethnicity on these calls is pretty white. Income is, $35,000 a year or under. Education is almost like most of the folks have either undergraduate or graduate degrees, marital status, you know, so you're really digging deep in like not just demographics, but then thinking about like where where these people are, how to reach them, what else they're interested in, what they're thinking about, and I think as an art maker, thinking about why you're making work for this person is important. And I will remind y'all that they're separate, right? Who you're making it for sometimes, but not always, is different than who is going to buy it, right? Sometimes it's the same. Sometimes you have like a super commercial revenue stream where you're like, here's this really nice mug. Here's my really nice mug from like one of those paint your own spots that my nephews and nieces made me, right? So like the target audience for that is really specific, and it is also who's going to pay for it, right? Who it's for and who's going to pay for it is the same. But if you're making like artwork, you know, a zine that you want to give away for free that's about reproductive rights and how to access those, probably the person it's for is not who's going to pay for it. That doesn't mean it's not valuable, but you should always be thinking about the why and who it's for in the creation process, not in a bad way, not in a sales way. So I put these worksheets up. Feel free to use all or none of it, but I strongly encourage y'all to like go away and think about those two things. Most marketing managers, so when I took my marketing the arts class in grad school, we had to do 4 personas. So 4 for each bit. So 4 personas of like, to segment the market audience. So my, you know, sample organization was a youth chorus. So I had like a donor, a parent, a teacher, and a kid that was going to be a part of the chorus, right? So you want to think about like, you know, if you have more than one stream. So like MJ, you're making your own artwork, but you're also a teaching artist. Those probably have different personas, right? Will need different marketing or very different people. And particularly as a teaching artist, who it's for and who's going to pay for it are always different. You know, particularly the kind of teaching artist work that you do, where the like institution pays for it, but the end user is not the institution and probably couldn't pay for it. So those 2 bits of thinking about deeply about who you need to build these relationships with in order to get your art out will help guide everything else about your marketing. Because now you know who it's for, then you'll think about how to reach them, how to most effectively reach them. But, you know, if you're just blanketing everything everywhere for everyone, that doesn't work. And we, you know, we hear really frequently in our grant programs, one of our questions is like, and the project grants for individuals is like, who is the audience for this? Who is this for? And so many people say it's for everyone. And it's not. Like, I promise y'all, your artwork is not for everyone. That is not a bad thing. That's a good thing. You know, like if something was for everyone, it would be, you know, nail clippers, right? It wouldn't be an interesting, thought-provoking piece of artwork. That was just the closest thing I had to like something that was boring. I thought about Post-it notes, but Post-it notes are not for everyone. So don't be afraid to limit who you're making stuff for and who you think is going to buy it, because that will only help you be more effective in reaching those folks. Yes, I do clip my nails at my desk. I get a lot, like I have really dry cuticles, so I get a lot of hangnails. And so like I'm on video meetings all day. So just like turn my video off, clip the hangnail. It's fine. Notices. So yes, I am clipping nails on my desk. I have a Roomba. It comes and cleans it up. It's fine. Okay. So those persona links are there in the chat. They're also already on the Business Basics website. So once you've thought about who it's for and who's going to buy it, who's going to give you the way that we assign value in the United States and that you need to survive, we're going to go back to joining these goals up with, yeah, Rachel.
One question about the who's going to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you answering that question based on past, like your list of collectors or people who've bought in the past? Because I find that always shocking. I can't believe who's bought it when I look at the demographic. But then, or am I thinking, who do I want to buy it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say both. Like, I would say there is no harm. I would absolutely look at both, particularly if who you want to buy it is not who's buying it now. Thinking about
buy it that's gonna buy it. But yeah, okay.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you wanna be able to target your marketing and all of this work you're doing to the people who are actually going to get the dollars in your hands so you can feed yourself, right? And that's not everyone. So there's pieces here. This is a great transition to talking about goals, because part of this is like looking at who's buying it now. That's going to be one demographic, and who you want to buy it. Like if there's a new market you want to reach, if there's this niche you want to move into that intersects with your values and your long-term goals and your shorter smart goals, then you should be thinking about who those people are and how to reach them, right? And then working towards that by creating marketing goals. So here's the next little worksheet. And again, this is, everything in arts marketing is all framed and has all been created for arts nonprofits. So we do a lot of like translating and pivoting as folks trying to be sort of in the world of like small business sole proprietor marketing, but also arts marketing, which is different than, accountant marketing. So I would replace this here has like my organization's mission statement. This is you, like put your values there and then put your top 3 long-term goals. And then you want to think about how your marketing can support those goals. So if you need to be developing a new super commercial stream of revenue to support your other art making, that's a marketing goal, right? Is like you have to make the work, but then you have to get people to buy it or people to see it. So everything should always come back to your values and your long-term goals. And you should be thinking about how to link those personas, who is going to be the end user and who is going to give you the dollars as part of getting to those long-term goals, right? It's all pieced together, but it all trickles out from that first week. So I think thinking really clearly, why do you want to reach them, these people, and what are your marketing goals is step 2 in thinking about marketing after you identify who it's for and who's going to pay for it. It also prevents things like just do it for exposure, because you can say, okay, exposure to who, how many, what demographics, why? Why is the big question. Like, oh, do you want to put an ad in this magazine? Right. Who reads it? Yes, I also hear you can dive in from exposure, particularly here in Rhode Island, though not today, but maybe last Saturday. It gives you an easier route to because doing stuff for free is not always bad, right? But you have to pick and choose. Like, does it bring you joy? Does it further your career in really specific ways? Because general exposure is meaningless, right? Like, paying for something or doing something for free, donating a piece of your art to a nonprofit who for their gala auction, but the folks that go to their gala auction are not anywhere near either any of your personas. They're not ever going to make a second buy. Like, don't do that unless you really, really believe in the nonprofit's mission and you're doing it for that reason and not to further your career. So that it helps stave off those like flailing marketing pieces. Hi, Kat. Flailing, he's just walking everywhere. Flailing marketing pieces where you're not focused and you're trying to put stuff everywhere just to be out there. You can think and be sure that you can spend your time, your resources, your money, because for a lot of y'all, time is the most valuable one of those, particularly in marketing. Like, y'all don't have a big old marketing budget and you're not spending a bunch of money marketing. It's time, right? So you can focus your time in on what's actually going to get you where you want to go, what's actually going to connect you with the folks that you want to be connecting with, building the relationships that make sense. You might not ever need a neti pot in Australia, so you don't need to work on building those relationships. But you might need somebody who has a cargo van in Providence, so you can work on building those relationships. Okay, I did put the goals in there. Okay, so then once you know who the people are, you know what your goals are, you know why you're doing this work, then you can start to think about the how, right? But the how, the tools are all useless until you know who and why. The tools are just a time waster. How do you reach those people? And then also, how do you develop relationships with them that go beyond just the immediate arm's length transaction, right? How do you make the eye contact and the thank you and the I see you that leads to a second interaction, a second sale, a second, enjoyment experience of your art? And I think those things to think about, that relationship building, are really valuable, particularly since a lot of artists are so dependent on social media and web stuff for marketing, which can seem very transactional, very one-directional. And Amanda Palmer talks about this a little bit, and the thing she's really good about is using those internet tools to make it not just a megaphone, but to make it a conversation, right? So remember that, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you're using, please don't try to use them all for marketing your art. You're not just using it to shout that you have new art, right? You're using it to build relationships and to have a conversation about whatever you're comfortable with, right? Some artists really want to talk about their lives, some don't. You need to be authentic to yourself. Many marketing experts or other experts will tell you need to do specific things. I never think that that's true, because I think you can't separate the artist from the human. So you need to do what feels right and works for you. But if you don't want to share your ups and downs and your hangovers, as Amanda Palmer would, share your process, right? Make it about the art, but make it more personal, make it a conversation, make it about the creation and the content, not just here's a new piece, here's how much money it costs, right? Okay. And then thinking about your marketing overall, about how it all links together. What story are you telling? How does your, if your Instagram and Facebook are public and linked to on your website, what does what idea of you and your work does someone get if they're looking at all those things? What does someone get if they click into your Instagram and look at all of your old posts all at once? Is that authentic to who you are, to your values, and to your long-term goals? That matters. What other people want or need or think you should be doing doesn't matter, right? Like, it all needs to be back into support of you, your values, your long-term goals. This stuff all supports you as a human and your art making, not the other way around. Wow, I'm going through this piece really fast. Yes. Okay, my 2 top marketing tips are find artists that you really love, and also artists making work like yours. Those are 2 different things. Sometimes they overlap. Watch what they're doing, right? Like, look at their websites, look at their Instagram, look at their Twitter, look at, what galleries they're in, look at how they're presenting themselves. Look and see what panels they're on, if they're doing those kind of public appearances. Notice what you like and what you don't like. Notice what's getting interactions. Notice what's working, what's not working. And remember that and use that as an education for like what you should be doing, right? It's good to see what other people are doing. It's not stealing. Don't use their exact same content, but notice the kinds of the style and the things that you like and that you resonate with. Make sure it reflects you. And then, the same advice everybody gives to every artist, which is be nice, build community, and support other artists and organizations. And that doesn't have to be with money. That doesn't always have to be with donations. And don't be afraid to say no. But sometimes say yes, in the way that you're building the long-term relationships and the mutual support and the mutual respect that can lead to things like bartering, that can lead to things like other jobs, that can lead to things like sales, but that can also lead to things like, hey, Serena, I have this cargo van in my, I don't actually, I have a Honda Fit. I have this cargo van that like, I only use once a week because to go to the farmer's market. Do you want to pay me like $20 to take, every time you need to borrow it? Like, right, it can lead to those kinds of situations too. So it's not always about, like, marketing isn't just about, and relationship building isn't just about sales, isn't just about making money. It's also about the relationships to get everything you need. It's the whole ecosystem rather than just about the dollars and cents. And I think that helps particularly folks that, have feelings about capitalism and our place in a capitalist society, right? It's like, it's not always about the dollars. Marketing isn't always about the dollars. Success isn't always about the dollars. Making a living isn't always about the dollars. It's about the relationships that enable you and other people to get what you need. And sometimes that's the dollars. That has to include the dollars because of where we live. So I'm also going to share this content marketing. I love my Honda Fit. Yeah, I love it so much. So this is a content marketing worksheet. And this is sort of the like, so after you do the goals, this is like a smaller marketing campaign specific thing. So you're like, okay, I have this one series of portraits that's about my younger sister, and I want to tell the story of our relationship. And so my content marketing is going to be about the creation process and my relationship with my sister and what I've learned and like her reaction to these paintings. So there's your content. Then you work through this, right, of like how you're going to execute that. But you start with the goals always, and then you work out into execution. And I will also say with marketing, it's very easy to feel like you are not doing enough and that you should be doing all of the things and that other people are doing all of the things. And if you just spent more time working on this kind of marketing, you would suddenly be super successful. And that's, none of that is true, right? Marketing is hard. Marketing is an endless pit. You could have a team, you know, each artist could have a team of 5 people doing just their marketing and they could still find more work, right? There would still be more to do. So make sure when you're thinking about, when you're spinning out these your bigger goals and your personas into the tools, into the actual ways you're doing it, that you're always focusing back on what's in alignment with your values and what will get you to your long-term goals. And everything else can be discarded, right? You can't spend all of your time marketing. You have to spend some of your time making your work, and you have to spend some of your time living your life, right? The marketing isn't supportive. So focusing in on the stuff that's really important, where you're really reaching the people you want to reach, is vital, because y'all's, you know, time is y'all's most valuable resource, particularly when we're talking about this kind of stuff. So focusing in on those personas, right? Those who is it for and who's going to pay for it, will help you focus in your marketing overall into what will actually help you achieve your goals without going into the rabbit hole, right? And like, you know, I look at arts organizations, you know, the large arts organizations, and we're in the middle, at risk of this process, hiring a communications person for the first time since I've been at Riska. I'm very excited. And it's been really interesting to see people be like, yeah, you know, we had a really small marketing team. There were 5 of us. And, you know, we're just like, okay. Yeah. Well, you realize that at Riska, it's just you, right? And there's no budget, you know? So I think it's all relative, right? Like if you get to that point where you have a bunch of people, you still feel like it's not enough. So be careful with marketing. It can be an endless hole. Okay. Ooh, suggested homework. I'm already to the end. So my suggested homework, things that y'all should be working on, are creating these 2 or more personas, depending on what your work looks like, right? It's going to be different for everybody how many personas you have. Think about the identifying goals, marketing goals, and I would revisit, you know, have your long-term goals and your SMART goals and your financial goals there when you're thinking about the marketing goals, right? Because those are all feed the marketing goals should feed the financial goals, should feed the long-term goals, should be in alignment with your values. Do the content marketing worksheet about something you're going to do in the next 12 months. And then this is my favorite one, and I might ask y'all, because y'all are sort of my consistent folks, to like come to the next class with some websites or Instagrams or Facebooks or something of artists that like you're into and you think are like just nailing the online marketing relationship building stuff in whatever way or whatever why, and like let's talk about what we like and what we don't like. One of the things I really like to do when I'm having an in-person class and like I have more time and it can be more hands-on is, and I straight up copied this from somebody else. So y'all who have been to this workshop, I think Serena for sure, also MJ, will know that I have like a whole bunch of marketing collateral of like business cards and that sort of stuff from artists. And I like to just dump it out on a table and ask people like what they like, what they don't like, and why. And the last time I did this, it devolved into people being like, well, now I want to look at their website and like see, and it was interesting. It was Sarah Azrael, who's a musician in Providence, and she also teaches at TAPA. They were like, they looked at her, some collateral piece for her, and they were like, I bet this person is like a singer-songwriter style musician and that it's like kind of like nice. And I was like, okay, well, y'all need to go to her website right now. And also like, way to knock it out of the park with that branding, right? Like, they could tell what kind of musician she was from her business card. So thinking about those kind of things and like being authentic and thoughtful, and, you know, I mean, that doesn't always happen, but that was particularly nutsy. And then starting to think about those tools once you have a clear idea of your personas, because y'all don't have the time and the resources to do a really good job of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, and LinkedIn, right? So like, where are the people that are in your personas? What social media are they using? Probably not TikTok, maybe TikTok, you know? So those sort of things will help you focus in on picking which tools you're going to use and how you're going to use them, but you have to know those things first. Okay. That's it. It's 5:20. Marketing questions. What do you want to talk about? You want to talk about your personas? Do you have questions or thoughts or feelings?
So are we going to talk about the tools later? Because that's where I have so many, and I have to say, it felt really good to hear you say that it's like a deep pit. Well, you didn't quite, I'm going to paraphrase, a deep pit of despair that you can get lost in easily and just end up feeling like everyone else in the world is successful and nailing this and I suck. And yeah.
It can feel like that, and that is absolutely not true, but also let's help you figure out how to feel like it's not true.
But I will share a story about, because you touched on this, and this is something that I've done for the last 2 years now, is that I find artists that I like, particularly Instagram. I think that's the best one for the visual arts. And then I look at when they post that they have an exhibition going up, and I see their artwork, and it's similar in content and price and all that stuff. And so then I go to those galleries and I look up those galleries. And then I start doing research on those particular galleries. And then sometimes those galleries I will reach out to and send my portfolio as I will. So I do that often and get a lot of rejection, as we all do. But it did happen recently that one of them, I thankfully did look, I reached out to and they reached back. And so because I did that, I'll be having a show with that gallery in a few years. And it all came from an artist that I liked, that I started following and then did the research on. So I do recommend that. That was a great thing to say.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's the best way to figure out what stuff y'all should be submitting for, is like what stuff, you know, because you don't want to submit to a gallery without knowing anything about them and without knowing that they have the audience for and are going to want to sell your kind of work. And the way that you know that is exactly this, is by creeping on people who are doing work you like and creeping on people who are doing work, that's the kids lingo, right? Creeping on, you know, following people who, you know, whose work you're really into, but also people whose work is similar to yours in some way, or people whose work might have the same persona, the same target market, right? Yeah, that's like, I do that. And I think also it's really important to like see if you can find somebody who's like where you want to be in your career exhibition wise and that kind of way in like 3 to 5 years, and follow them, because that really helps you get there, right? Because you're seeing where they're submitting. Cool. Okay. If we don't have any other stuff, I might say goodbye until Thursday when I have the office hour. Oh, I need to move the office hour. Nobody ever comes to my office hour on Thursday, but on Thursday I'm taking a racial equity training in the afternoon. So I am going to move the office hour 1 hour later, so I can take the whole racial equity training, which is important. Yeah. Y'all, I'm so stoked. Mandatory risk of staff have to take a racial equity, like a multi-hour, good external person equity training. I'm just like, anyway, I'm looking forward to it. Okay. I have tomorrow off. Tomorrow's a state holiday. I'll be back in the corner of my living room cubicle on Thursday morning. So I'll probably take this next 30 minutes and try and get this recording and then any other resources that I didn't already put up. But all of those worksheets that I linked to in the chat are already on the website. And y'all are so amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Night.